Thank you, Crystal, for such a wonderful introduction. And as Crystal mentioned, we have an exciting panel for you today. So I'd like to start by checking in with Infervision. So how can AI help with monitoring nodule volumes and follow-up?
Yeah, great question. So at Infervision, we have an AI solution for CT lung, so early lung nodule detection, automatic. And in terms of volume, it gives an automatic volume calculation. And what's really nice as well is that you're able to follow up these nodules as well, so it can show you kind of longitudinal changes, so things like the volume doubling time, what's happening with other nodules, so if the volumes are increasing, decreasing, staying the same. And then we also have a nodule density analysis, so you can see which parts of the nodules are solid, which are subsolid, which are ground glass, and it helps you decide where you're going to biopsy, what's happening to the solid components of the nodule as well. So those are just some of the features that we have when it comes to kind of lung cancer screening with nodules.
Excellent, thank you. That's very interesting. And then over to Annalise or Thirona?
Thirona.
Thirona, I'm so
Yes.
sorry. Thank you.
No worries.
Thank you for clarifying. So, question for you, how can AI assist in the assessment of lung parenchymal disease from the CTs obtained for lung cancer screening?
Yeah, so I think a very interesting question, because now you're going to analyze those CTs. And of course, your aim is to detect nodules. But there's a lot of other things to see, and my motto is see the unseen, measure the unmeasurable. To give a little bit background of this, I'm from origin pediatric pulmonologist, did my PhD on COPD and worked 30 years on research how to measure lung damage. And that got me into contact with Thirona, and especially to measure airway abnormalities and also parenchymal abnormalities. And what we learned from the comparing, let's say, advanced scoring systems with automated systems is that the eye is very insensitive to pick up special bronchial changes, thickening and widening, often defined as bronchiectasis. And the same is true for emphysema, actually. So now we have patients, smokers, they get into screening. They, of course, the primary aim is to detect nodules, yes or no. But what we know from the screening programs is that between 30 and 50% of those CTs also show emphysema. And shocking, of those patients with emphysema, 80% is not diagnosed with COPD. So I think in terms of the parenchymal abnormalities, which we should think about, is especially emphysema. The other one being abnormalities related to bronchitis, chronic bronchitis. Thirona is the preferred partner of COPD gene, analyzing all the CTs of COPD gene. What we learned from a recent study, and that was initiated by James Crapo, is how can you identify at an early stage patients who progress fast from GOLD stage 1 to 2 to 3. And actually, a very important component of that is actually inflammatory changes of the airway wall. And I asked, at many conferences, I asked radiologists and pulmonologists, I asked, how many airways do you evaluate when you scroll through a CT? Most start thinking about how many airways are there. Well, actually, most say like between 15 and 25 probably visually are examined. In reality, there are between 300 to 1,000 bronchus artery pairs to measure. So AI can do that, which means now you can get information on emphysema, and Thirona has LungQ. It's an FDA cleared platform to quantify emphysema at a lower level even. And they also have algorithms to actually automatically measure airway dimensions and to give you a number that gives you a very sensitive readout, an accurate readout of this inflammatory thickening. So that is, I think, Yeah, but, oh yeah, so maybe the other thing I want to add to that, of course, what are we going to do with this information? And I'm not into the details of screening, but of course, would it make more impact on the patient that you don't have nodules, but you have 30% of your lungs show emphysema, and you have serious bronchitis going on? You are likely to become a pulmonary cripple in X years. And of course, I think programs have to show that what is the impact of that information on smoking cessation, how it can contribute to the quality of life of patients.
Thank you for that. It's really amazing the impact that AI can have on the quality of life of patients and their treatment. So we're hoping that our third partner will still join us, but that just means that we have time for some questions for our panelists. Does anyone have a question? Anything at all? This is your opportunity. We don't get these two together very often. All right.
Let's do that so everybody can
Thank
hear.
you. What are some of the major institutions you've worked with?
The major institutions. So Thirona as a company. I think at present it is the software is used in clinical trials, and so I told in the beginning I told you I'm a clinician from origin, and my trajectory I think is finished when the image analysis capacity is at the bedside, which means we did a lot of validation studies in multiple cohorts, so cystic fibrosis, PCD, bronchiectasis, COPD, etc., severe asthma. The next step in that validation roadmap is clinical trials. So that is ongoing. Another important part of that roadmap is image analysis in registries. So COPD gene is not a real registry, but it's a huge cohort study. There are similar cohort studies in cystic fibrosis going on. There were Theronas involved, collecting 10,000 CTs of CF patients. And that will tell us how this kind of quantitative information, and of course it's automated, you get very reproducible numbers and very sensitive and accurate. So what it adds to those registries, what it can tell us on risk factors for progression, risk factors for exacerbations, for mortality. So that is happening in cystic fibrosis, 10,000 CTs. Same thing is happening now for bronchiectasis, the EMBARK registry, 14,000 patients. We did a pilot study in 1,000 patients, measuring, again, the structural abnormalities you can identify in those patients, to phenotype the patients. And I'm sure, and there, of course, there are multiple screening, there's a lot of screening data out there. And of course, I think that is very interesting to the Nelson study, etc., and to also use that kind of algorithms to see what else can we learn from the CTs. But at the end, I want to point out, it is to help the patient. And I think it's bad news if you have emphysema and you have this air wall thickening, you know you will progress, but it's like children. They adapt to their disability. They don't run anymore, so very slowly people don't notice. I think to have a discussion with your clinician, what does it mean for me? I hope it will help them to quit smoking and to have a better life.
From Infervision, so we have obtained our FDA and CE marking, so we are already on the market in a few sites in America. I'm from the European team, so we're in France, Germany, Switzerland, Poland, UK. So yes, we are starting to roll out the CT lung, especially as more and more countries are looking at kind of lung cancer screening. It's relatively new in the UK, so we've just recently started to establish that. But yeah, it's definitely been rolled out across Europe and the US at the moment.
Great, thank you. Any other questions for our panelists? Yes, yes, please.
That's good.
Do you think the use of this software will actually help people get less CTs and less exposure?
wants to take that?
In terms of kind of lung cancer screening, of course, we're looking at kind of the greater benefit for the population. So we're trying to identify these lung diseases early so that there is reduced morbidity and mortality for the population. In terms of trying to reduce future CT scans, it might in the interim, I think in the beginning, we'll probably have more CT scans because we're going to be doing more follow-ups. We're going to identify more nodules that we probably didn't before. But I think after that initial stage, we will get into a nice rhythm where actually overall we have reduced the amount of radiation that people are getting.
Maybe I can add to that. So one association is also emphysema mortality and nodules and mortality and this bronchial wall thickening and mortality. So the screening is a one-size-fits-all kind of protocol. And I think I agree, with time we will learn what I call stratified monitoring. So you have high risk, you will discover other phenotypic characteristics that will increase the risk for that subject for developing lung cancer. So that's a person that should be more frequently monitored. While on the other end, there are probably also patients with a more lower risk profile. So moving away from a one-size-fits-all to stratified screening. And that will reduce the number of CTs, of course.